11.txt. Please, somebody tell me where the curb is. I can't hear the street anymore. Alden Merrick's voice cracked in the flooded detour at 8:41 p.m., one hand shaking over a fiberglass white cane bent almost in half where a taxi tire had rolled across it, the other clutching a rain-softened Braille address card that said his home was still 3.2 miles away. The sidewalk had vanished under brown water. A construction barricade lay flat against his shoe, and every horn, pump motor, and passing engine stole the one sense he depended on to stay alive in a city built for people who could see. Then a row of Harley headlights cut through the rain, and Garron Ridge, Lowell stepped out of the glare. A broad white man of 55 with a gray beard, a long scar roping down his neck, his creaking Hell's Angels leather vest dripping black rain as his massive shadow swallowed the broken cane at Alden's feet. Alden flinched at the deep V-twin rumble, turning his face toward the wrong side of the street as if the sound itself were another vehicle coming too close. But Garron stopped before his boots touched the fallen barricade. He did not grab the old man. He did not bark orders. He lifted one scarred hand to his own riders and made two fingers go still, and the motorcycles behind him dropped from a hard growl to a low, steady pulse that rolled under the storm like a heartbeat. "Sir," Garron said, his voice rough but level, "don't move. I'm putting my voice on your left." Alden's chest rose fast beneath his soaked brown coat, and rain ran from the brim of his cap onto his pale, tense mouth. "My cane," he said. "The taxi hit it. I had the curb, then the pump started, then the barricade moved, and I lost everything." Garron looked down, not at the man's eyes, but at the facts around him. The snapped fiberglass shaft, the bent red tip, the Braille card bleeding ink at the edges, the waterline climbing over the curb cut, and the orange plastic fence twisted around a steel signpost. He knew a bad street when he saw one. He also knew pride when it was trying not to break. Behind him, the other bikers, all grown men in rain-dark leather, spread out without a word. One angled his Harley so the headlight lit the fallen barrier instead of Alden's face. Another rolled his bike 3 feet back from the puddle. A third pulled a strip of reflective cloth from a saddlebag and tied it around a loose cone. No one shoved traffic. No one threatened anybody. They simply made the chaos smaller. Garron crouched, the smell of old engine oil, wet leather, and rust rising from him as rain tapped against the metal buckles on his vest. He picked up the broken cane and ran his thumb over the split, feeling where the fibers had cracked but not shattered. "This can hold for a while," he said. Alden swallowed. "You can fix it?" Garron reached into the side pouch of his Harley and pulled out a roll of heavy-duty black tape, the kind used on wiring harnesses and cracked tool grips. "Long enough to get you your street back." He lined the 2 broken sections together, braced them against the flat side of a construction sign, and wrapped the brake once, twice, then 4 more tight turns until the cane stopped folding in his hands. The tape squeaked under his thumb. Small sound. Big mercy. Alden stood frozen while the city roared around him. But when Garron placed the repaired cane into his open palm, he did it slowly, letting the old man find the grip himself. "Your curb is 11 o'clock, Garron said. "Water over the edge. Metal plate 2 steps past it. My voice stays left until you say otherwise." Alden lowered the cane. The tip tapped water, then concrete, then the raised lip of the curb, faint but real beneath the storm. His shoulders dropped 1 inch. Garron saw it. "There," he said. "That's yours." Alden's fingers tightened around the taped shaft, and for the first time since the taxi sped away, he turned toward the sound without panic. Behind them, Harley headlights held the rain open like a tunnel, and Garron Lowell stood beside him, not as a wall of fear, but as a rough, silent marker in the dark. Alden tested the repaired cane again, sweeping it across the flooded edge where sidewalk should have been, and the taped brake held with a faint rubbery creak under his palm. "I'm not lost like this," he said, almost angry at himself, though his voice still trembled. "I know this route. I've walked it for 19 years. Garron stayed on Alden's left, one boot planted in 6 inches of brown water, rain running off his gray beard and down the scar at his neck. "Then the route changed on you," he said. "That was all. It was enough." Alden drew one slow breath and tried to rebuild the city inside his head. Bakery vent on Fulton, church bell 3 blocks west, bus hiss near the corner, the hollow echo under the bank awning. But tonight, every landmark had been torn apart by the flooded construction detour. A pump engine hammered from somewhere ahead, a generator coughed behind a stack of orange barrels, and traffic horns bounced off the glass storefronts until left and right became the same cruel sound. He was a man who lived by echoes. The echoes had lied. A white-haired woman in a raincoat, grown and worried, stepped close with both hands raised. "Maybe we should just take his arm and get him across," she said. Garron turned his head slowly, not threatening her, only making sure she heard him over the rain. "Don't grab him." The woman froze, embarrassed, and Alden's shoulders tightened before easing again. Garron lowered his voice. "Ask first. Always. A short lesson. No sermon." The woman nodded and backed up half a step, her face softening when she realized Alden had heard every word. Garron crouched near the broken barricade and touched the water with 2 fingers, watching the current pull grit toward an open drain covered by a warped steel plate. He could smell wet rust, old asphalt, diesel fumes, and the sharp bite of electrical tape warming under his hand. Behind him, the bikers adjusted without being told. One rider eased his Harley 10 feet to the right and let the engine idle at a steady low note. Another killed his motor completely, so Alden would have one clear sound instead of 5 competing ones. "Mr. Merrick," Garron said, using the name Alden had given him in a strained whisper moments earlier, "I need 3 answers. Which hand do you trust most? Right. What sound can you still separate?" Alden tilted his head, rain clicking against the brim of his cap. "Your bike. The low one. It doesn't jump around like the pumps." "Good. Where did the cane fold?" "Just above the lower joint. About 8 inches up." Garron nodded, even though Alden could not see it, then corrected himself with words. "I've got it. Tape is above the joint, not on the tip. You'll still feel the ground." A city worker in a yellow slicker stood near the fallen fence, his hard hat dripping, looking torn between duty and confusion. "Sidewalks closed for another block," he called. Pedestrian path washed out when the storm drain backed up. Garron lifted one hand. "Any open trench?" "Covered plates only. 2 loose cones. 1 bent sign." "Then we move slow." Alden heard the sentence and understood something important. This stranger was not deciding for him. He was describing the world so Alden could decide with him. Garron tapped the toe of his boot against the curb once, then used the end of a 9/16-inch wrench to strike the metal construction sign twice, clean and spaced apart. Alden turned toward the sound, his face still pale, but no longer spinning blindly through noise. "That sign is your 12 o'clock, Garron said. "My bike is behind your left shoulder. Water moves toward your right shoe. Cane first." Alden reached forward. The fiberglass tip clicked against concrete, slid over a seam, then found the ribbed warning strip at the curb ramp. His mouth tightened, not in fear this time, but concentration. 1 inch of trust returned. Garron saw it in the way the old man's grip changed from panic to purpose. The other bikers held their places, leather dark with rain, headlights angled low across the broken detour, their rough shapes standing between the traffic and a man trying to hear his way back into the world. Alden took one careful step, then another, and for the first time that night, the city made a little sense again. Garron let Alden take 3 more careful steps before he asked about the card. "You said your address was on paper," he said. "Can I look at it if you hand it to me?" Alden stopped with the repaired cane angled across his shoes, water tapping against the fiberglass tip, and for a second his face tightened, as if the question had touched something private. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his soaked coat and pulled out a small laminated card, softened at one corner where rain had worked under the plastic. "Braille on one side," Alden said. "Print on the other. My wife made me carry the first one. I made this copy after she passed." Garron did not snatch it. He held out his palm and waited until Alden placed it there himself. The card was slick with rain, the raised dots still there beneath Garron's thumb, but the printed ink had run into gray streaks around the street number. One biker stepped closer with a flashlight, but Garron lifted 2 fingers and pointed the beam down, away from Alden's face and away from the crowd gathering under the awnings. He read what he could without saying the full address out loud. Privacy mattered, even here. "Hawthorne Row," Garron said quietly. 3.2 miles east, then north by the old brick post office. Alden turned his head toward him. "You know it." "I know the hill before it." "Then you know I can walk it." A A city worker in a yellow rain slicker came closer, both hands open, boots scraping grit across the flooded curb ramp. He was a grown man with a tired face and a radio clipped to his chest, and he looked like he had been fighting the same storm for hours. "Sir, that direction is bad tonight," he said. "We've got standing water under the rail bridge, 2 signal boxes out, and the pedestrian audio at Baxley Avenue is buried under pump noise. Best thing is to wait for a ride." Alden's jaw set. "I don't take rides from strangers when I can't map the inside of the vehicle." The worker looked at Garron, almost pleading for someone else to take charge. Garron did not. He wiped rain off the card with the edge of his glove, slid it back toward Alden's open hand, and he said no. Simple words. Firm ground. Alden closed his fingers around the card, and his breathing steadied by a fraction. Behind them, traffic crawled past the angled Harley headlights, tires pushing brown waves against the gutter. One rider, a broad white man with a silver mustache, moved a fallen cone 6 feet from a drain and tied reflective cloth around it so cars could see the edge. Another biker took a small folding triangle from his saddlebag and set it near the bent sign. "No shouting. No show. Just work." Garron asked the city worker, "Which path is covered, not open?" The worker blinked. "What? Covered plates, ramps, barricades. Not trenches. Not guessing." The man pointed through the rain. "East side of Monroe, then the bank awning, then the service alley by Larkin. But it's slower." "Slower is fine." Garron turned back to Alden. "You hear my bike?" Alden tilted his head. The low V-twin note sat behind the storm, steady and heavy, different from the frantic pumps. "Yes. That stays behind your left shoulder. Wrench taps mean metal edge. My voice means stop or step. Your cane decides first." Alden's mouth moved like he wanted to object, then didn't. He swept the cane, found the curb again, and nodded once. Garron looked down at the taped brake and added 2 more tight wraps, 11 turns in all, pressing the black tape flat with his thumb until water beaded on it instead of soaking through. The cane was ugly now, patched like an old tool that refused to quit. It would do. A bus hissed somewhere beyond the flooded intersection, and Alden flinched at the sudden air brake. But Garron struck the construction sign twice with the 9/16" wrench, clean and calm. Alden found the sound and turned back to it. The city had not become safe. Not yet. But it had gained a rhythm, and for a blind man standing in rain among broken barricades, rhythm was the first shape of home. Garron lifted his right hand, palm flat, and the riders moved like they had practiced in worse weather than this. The first Harley rolled forward only 6 feet, its front tires stopping short of the painted lane line, headlight angled low so it washed across the flooded curb instead of blinding drivers. The second bike eased behind it at a diagonal, chrome forks shining with rain, engine dropping into a slow, steady thump that Alden could separate from the pump motors. The third rider dismounted and carried 2 reflective triangles from his saddlebag, placing one near the bent construction sign and another beside the sunken curb ramp where the water hid the edge. It looked intimidating from a distance. Up close, it was careful. Garron did not raise his voice at traffic, did not touch a single car, did not turn his body into a threat. He simply made the road readable again, using steel, light, and patience. "We're making a lane," he told Alden. "Not for cars. For you." Alden stood with the taped cane across his body, listening as the storm rearranged itself around the new rhythm. One motorcycle behind his left shoulder. One wrench tap ahead. One low voice beside him. 3 things he could trust. A driver somewhere leaned on a horn, long and irritated, and Alden's fingers jumped on the cane grip. Garron's head turned toward the sound, rain dripping from the edge of his black leather vest, the red and white rocker shapes darkened by water. His scar pulled tight when his jaw moved, but his words stayed calm. "He can wait 20 seconds. The rider with the silver mustache stepped into the glow between the bikes and lifted both hands in a plain traffic-slowing gesture, not angry, not dramatic, just visible. The car eased down. Water lapped against the gutter. "Cane first," Garron said. Alden swept the tip forward and found the ribbed warning strip at the curb ramp. The repaired section flexed slightly under the heavy-duty tape, but it held. He took one step. Garron stayed half a pace back and to the left, close enough for his voice to be a landmark, far enough not to steal Alden's balance. "Cone at 1 o'clock. Flat side down. Ignore it." Alden moved the cane, touched plastic, then slid around it. Steel plate in 2 steps. It'll sound hollow. The cane tapped concrete, water, then metal with a dull ringing note that traveled up Alden's wrist. He stopped before Garron told him to. A faint smile touched the biker's mouth and vanished under his wet beard. Good read. Small praise. Big strength. A city worker dragged the fallen barricade upright, and another grown man under the bank awning held his phone light toward the sidewalk without stepping in Alden's path. The woman in the raincoat who had tried to grab Alden earlier now walked 20 feet ahead, warning people to give him space instead. She had learned fast. Garron watched all of it while keeping count. 8 feet to the curb break, 4 inches of water over the plate, 1 loose sign bolt rattling in the wind. Details kept people safe. Noise made people careless. The group reached the narrowest part of the detour, where a temporary chain link panel had bowed into the walking path, and a hose from the pump crossed the ground like a wet black snake. Alden's cane struck the hose and bounced. He froze. Garron did not touch him. He crouched, the smell of engine oil and rain-soaked leather rising as his boots sank into the runoff, and pressed the hose flatter with the heel of his glove. Round rubber line, he said. About 2 inches high. Step over with your right foot. Alden lifted his foot, cleared it, and planted down on the other side. 1 clean step. The bikers held the steel wall behind them until the old man made it past the worst of the flooded corner. Then, one by one, the Harleys rolled backward, leaving no challenge, no scene, only a safer pocket in the storm. Alden turned his head toward Garron's voice. You ride like you're blocking the whole street. Garron looked at the taped cane, the trembling hand, the water running off the old man's sleeve. Tonight, he said, the street can spare 10 feet. Past the flooded corner, the city changed from panic to endurance. Alden could feel it in the way the sidewalk rose under his cane, in the colder wind sliding between office towers, in the smell of wet concrete giving way to coffee grounds from a closed cafe vent. Garron stayed beside him, boots heavy but measured, his Hell's Angels leather vest creaking whenever he shifted his shoulders under the rain. Behind them, the other riders kept a loose formation, not crowding Alden, not turning the walk into a parade, just holding enough light across the broken pavement so cars and late-night pedestrians understood that space had a purpose. You said 19 years, Garron said. Same route. Alden swept the repaired cane left, right, left, the taped joint making a soft rasp beneath his fingers. Mostly. Different buildings now. Same bones. And tonight. Alden hesitated at the edge of a shallow puddle, found the concrete lip, and stepped over it. Tonight was supposed to be simple. I tuned a piano at the chapel on 8th. Last appointment of the month. They're moving the instrument tomorrow, and if it was hauled out sharp or flat, it would embarrass the whole room. Garron glanced toward him. You went out in this for a piano? Alden's mouth tightened, but not with offense. For the people who still listened to it. A short answer. It carried weight. They passed under a dark awning where rain hammered the metal above them, and for a moment the pump noise fell behind. Alden's voice became steadier in that pocket of cover. He told Garron the piano was an old upright, walnut veneer cracked near the bass side, middle C sticking in humid weather, A above the staff always drifting 3 cents sharp. He knew the instrument by touch the way other men knew an engine bay. Loose tuning pins, worn felt, 1 pedal with a tired spring. His wife had played that same piano years ago during quiet memorial evenings for city workers, retirees, and neighbors who had nobody else to fill the room with music. Since she died, Alden had kept tuning it for free. Not charity. Promise. Garron said nothing for several steps, and Alden seemed grateful for that silence. Some men filled pain with words because they were afraid of hearing it breathe. Garron was not afraid of silence. Rain ran down the scar on his neck and disappeared under the collar of his soaked shirt, and the smell of old oil rose each time his wet gloves brushed the tool pouch at his belt. My left ear doesn't catch high pitch right, Garron said at last. Alden turned his head slightly. From riding? From a bad piece of road and a worse lesson. Long time ago. He did not explain more, and Alden did not ask. Garron tapped the 9/16-inch wrench once against a railing post as they approached a narrow stretch where scaffolding posts crowded the curb. Metal line on your right. 3 posts, about 4 feet apart. Alden angled the cane, found the first post, then the second, then the third. The rhythm settled between them. Cane tap, wrench tap, boot step, engine pulse far behind. A metronome made from a storm. At the next corner, Alden stopped, so suddenly Garron lifted one hand to halt the riders behind them. "The bakery," Alden whispered. Garron looked across the street at a shuttered storefront with steam leaking faintly from a roof vent. "Yeah." Alden breathed in through his nose, rain dripping from his cap. "Cinnamon on Tuesdays. Rye on Fridays. Burnt sugar when the night crew overdoes the pans." His shoulders lowered again, another inch of the city returning to him. Garron understood then that he was not leading a helpless man home. He was helping a skilled man recover a map the storm had torn apart. There was a difference, and it mattered. "You've got this block," Garron said. Alden's hand tightened around the cane, right above the 11 black wraps of tape. "I had it before. You still do." The words were rough, almost too plain to be comfort, but Alden heard them clearly. He stepped out from under the awning and back into the rain, the patched cane clicking ahead of him like a small instrument, insisting on its note. They left the awning with the bakery smell behind them, and the first long stretch of the 3.2-mile walk opened like a test neither man had asked for. The rain came sideways between the office towers, cold enough to make Alden's fingers stiff around the patched cane, but Garron kept his pace half a step behind and to the left, his voice low, exact, and never hurried. "Mailbox at 10 o'clock. Broken curb after it. Puddle starts at your right shoe." Alden swept the cane through shallow water, found the mailbox post with a clean tap, then angled away before his toe reached the curb brake. Behind them, the riders moved in pieces instead of a crowd. One Harley idled at the rear with its headlight low. Another rolled ahead to the next corner, where a grown man in a delivery jacket had parked too close to the ramp and left only a narrow passage by the curb. The biker did not yell at him. He pointed at the flooded crossing, then at Alden's cane, and the driver understood enough to pull forward 8 feet. Space appeared. Garron smelled wet rubber from the tires, rust from the storm grates, and old engine oil rising off his own gloves each time he flexed his hands. He kept watching the ground the way a mechanic watched a running chain, not for drama, but for the one small failure that could hurt someone. "Metal plate in 3 steps," he said. "It'll ring." Alden tapped forward, heard the dull steel note, and paused. "Loose. Left edge lifted about half an inch. Then I take the right. You take the right. Simple. Shared." At the next signal, the walk indicator clicked somewhere across the intersection, but the sound was nearly buried under a portable generator humming beside a fenced service pit. Alden turned toward the wrong corner, jaw tightening as the old fear rose through him again. Garron struck the 9/16-inch wrench against the rail of a newspaper box, 3 slow taps with a hard pause after them. Alden corrected himself, breathing through his nose. "Your wrench is cleaner than the signal," he said. "Signal's losing tonight," Garron answered. A rider with rain beading on his silver mustache walked ahead and tested the curb ramp with the heel of his boot, then held up 2 fingers, 2 inches of standing water. Garron translated it into words. "Water over the ramp. No drop. Cane will drag first, then climb." Alden nodded and moved. He was not fast, but he was accurate, and the more accurate he became, the less he looked like a man being rescued. He looked like a man reclaiming a route, one contact point at a time. Half a mile later, the sidewalk narrowed beside a row of temporary plywood walls, their seams rattling in the wind. The cane tip caught in a gap, and the tape joint gave a small warning bend. Alden stopped at once. Garron crouched in the runoff, rain dripping from his beard, and pressed the tape with his thumb. 11 wraps still held, but the lower shaft had twisted a quarter turn. He pulled a short plastic zip tie from his tool pouch, cinched it above the brake, then added a second tie below it, clipping the tails with a small side cutter. 2 clicks. Done. Try it now. Alden swept the cane, felt the cleaner line, and let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Ugly repair. Best kind when it works. The riders behind them chuckled softly, and the sound warmed the cold space without turning Alden into a spectacle. Another block passed. Then another. The city's chaos thinned into pieces Alden could name. Dripping awning, hollow drain cover, warm laundry vent, rough brick wall on the right. Near the mouth of the rail underpass, the air changed. It grew lower, wetter, and full of echo. Garron heard it before Alden stopped moving. The pumps behind them blurred into the traffic above, and the tunnel ahead swallowed every clean sound. Alden's cane hovered over the first dark sheet of water. His hand tightened around the black tape. Garron did not step in front of him. He only raised one hand to still the Harleys behind them and said, "We take this one slow." The rail underpass turned the whole city into one hard, echoing room. Water crawled over the concrete in a dark sheet, no higher than Alden's ankles, but the sound of it was everywhere. Under his cane, against the walls, in the drain grates, beneath the traffic passing overhead. He took one step, then stopped as if the ground had vanished. "No," he whispered. Garron heard the change in him before the word finished. The old man's breathing went shallow, his right hand locked around the patched cane, and the braille card crackled wetly inside his coat pocket as his chest tightened against it. Behind them, the Harleys had gone quiet except for one low idle far back at the tunnel mouth. But even that steady sound broke apart under the concrete ceiling and came back from 3 directions at once. Alden turned his face left, then right, lost inside echoes that lied like mirrors. "I can't tell where you are," he said, and there was shame in it, heavier than fear. Garron did not answer too fast. He took one slow step to the steel handrail along the underpass wall and wrapped his gloved fingers around it, testing how solid it was. Rust flaked under his thumb, rainwater ran along the lower bar, and a loose bolt clicked where the rail met the concrete. He tapped the rail once with a 9/16-inch wrench. The sound rang clean. "Here," Garron said. Alden did not move. "If I cross this and I still don't know where I am," Alden said, "then it's not just tonight." His mouth worked for a second before he forced the rest out. "Then the city took my route from me." Garron looked at the man standing in the underpass water, soaked coat hanging heavy from narrow shoulders, cane held together by 11 wraps of black tape and 2 zip ties, pride fighting panic with everything it had left. The biker's face stayed rough, his scar pale under the tunnel light, but his voice softened by a shade. "No," he said. "Tonight got loud. That's different." A short line. It held. Garron lifted the wrench again and made 3 slow taps against the rail, each one spaced wide enough to cut through the underpass noise. Then he stopped for one full breath. Then 3 more. Tap, tap, tap. Silence. Tap, tap, tap. The pattern settled into the tunnel like a metronome, steadier than traffic, steadier than rain. Alden turned his head toward it. 3 and a rest, he said. "Like counting in. You tell me if it's wrong." "It's right." Garron kept the rhythm, not walking ahead, not pulling him, only giving the sound a spine. Alden lowered the cane and swept it forward. The tip touched water, then smooth concrete, then the shallow lip of a drainage channel. He mapped it with 2 small movements and stepped over. The water soaked the cuff of his pants. He did not stop. Behind them, the riders held their places at both ends of the underpass, headlights turned away from Alden's face and angled across the pavement, so approaching drivers slowed before the tunnel. One rider used a reflective triangle to mark the entrance. Another stood near the far curb with both hands visible, rain dripping from his sleeves, making sure no one rushed the narrow passage. No one shouted. No one made a scene. The Brotherhood became quiet infrastructure, built out of engines, leather, light, and patience. Halfway through the tunnel, a truck rolled overhead, and the underpass boomed so hard Alden flinched. His cane skidded against the drainage lip, and the taped joint bent with a dry little squeal. Garron stopped tapping at once. "Freeze." Alden froze. Water moved around his shoes. Garron crouched, touched the cane near the brake without taking it away, and pressed the zip tie flat. Still holding. "Turn the tip 2 inches right." Alden did. The cane found flat ground again. Garron resumed the 3-tap pattern, slower this time, letting Alden rebuild the tunnel in pieces. Rail on the left, drain on the right, water ahead, biker's voice behind the sound. When Alden reached the far slope, the echo opened up and the rain sounded like rain again. His shoulders dropped, not 1 inch this time, but all at once. Garron lowered the wrench. Alden stood at the mouth of the underpass, breathing hard, cane tip planted on dry concrete, and did not let go. "I crossed it," he said. Garron looked past him toward Hawthorne Row, still hidden beyond the wet streets, and nodded with his words. "You crossed it." The far side of the underpass felt like another city, quieter at first, then slowly familiar under Alden's cane. The rain still fell hard, and traffic still hissed along the avenue behind them. But the echoes no longer bounced off concrete walls and came back false. Alden stood for one breath with the repaired cane planted on dry pavement, then swept it left and found the raised seam he expected near the storm drain. His head lifted. "This is Larkin," he said. Garron glanced at the dark street sign half hidden behind a wet maple branch. "It is." Alden's mouth moved as if he were counting something inside. 3 long blocks, then Hawthorne Row. "You want my bike behind your left shoulder?" Garron asked. Alden listened to the rain, the far idle of the Harley, the softer boots of the riders spreading out behind them. "Farther back now," he said. "I know some of this." Garron gave one short nod, then spoke it aloud. "Farther back." The lead rider rolled the idling Harley another 30 feet away, leaving only a low pulse under the storm instead of a guide pressed too close. That mattered. Alden moved with more of himself now, not fast, not smooth, but chosen. The cane clicked across old sidewalk squares, one cracked corner, then a strip of brick paving slick with rain. "Brick underfoot," Garron said. "I know." Alden almost smiled. Small victory. Big night. They passed a closed cobbler's shop with a loose gutter ticking water into a metal trash can, and Alden turned his face toward it before anyone described it. "Old Mr. Dorsey never fixed that downspout," he murmured. Garron did not know Mr. Dorsey, and he did not need to. He only heard the route returning to the man in pieces. Downspout, maple roots, bakery steam gone thin in the rain, a rough wall on the right where ivy dragged against brick. Then Alden's hand shot to his coat pocket. The card. The Braille address card slipped free before he could catch it, hit the wet sidewalk, and skated toward the curb on a sheet of runoff. One of the riders stepped forward and stopped it with the edge of his boot, gentle as closing a drawer. He did not pick it up. "Card is at your 2 o'clock, Garron said. "About 3 feet. My man's boot is behind it." Water moving toward the gutter. Alden lowered himself slowly, knees stiff, left hand braced on the taped cane, right hand searching the wet concrete. Rain ran off his cap and down his wrist. His fingers touched grit, then the slick edge of plastic, then the raised braille dots under his thumb. He picked it up himself. The rider backed away without a word. Alden held the card to his chest for a second, breathing through the kind of gratitude that did not want witnesses. "The first one was sealed better," he said. "My wife used a little home laminator. Crooked corners. Too much heat on one side." Garron looked down the row of houses, their porch lights blurred yellow in the rain. "This one still got you close." "It got me close because somebody read it without making me feel like a public notice." Garron's face stayed hard, but his eyes changed. "You're not a notice." They turned onto Hawthorne Row at 10:18 p.m., with water running along the curb like a narrow black ribbon. Alden began naming the houses by sound and smell. The wind chime with one missing tube, the porch fan with a tired bearing, the damp leaves under the 4th maple. At the 5th house, his cane struck a familiar split in the sidewalk, 2 inches wide, shaped like a crooked V. He stopped. His shoulders lifted once, then fell. Home is 3 doors. Garron let the riders fall even farther back, their headlights now only a soft glow on the wet street. Alden found the first porch post, counted the second, then reached the small wooden steps of his own house. His key ring came out of his coat pocket with a cold metallic jingle, but his fingers were numb and the key slipped from his grip, landing on the top step. Garron lifted his flashlight and aimed it down at the boards, not at Alden's face, not at the lock, not taking over. "Key is flat side up, 6 inches from your left shoe." Alden bent, found it, and let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a laugh. The patched cane rested against the porch rail, 11 black wraps and 2 zip ties shining in the rain. Alden guided the key toward the lock. The first try missed. The second scraped brass. The third slid home with a small, clean click. Alden turned the key, and the little house opened with a soft inward sigh, warm air touching his wet face before he stepped across the threshold. He paused there, one hand on the doorframe, the other still wrapped around the patched cane, as if he needed to be sure the floorboards remembered him too. They did. The first board gave its familiar low creak, the second stayed quiet, and somewhere deeper inside the house an old radiator clicked 3 times and rested. Garron stood outside on the porch with rain running from his gray beard and dripping off the hem of his Hell's Angels leather vest, his massive shape filling the yellow porch light, but not crowding the doorway. The other riders remained down by the curb, grown men in wet leather and heavy boots, their Harley headlights lowered toward the street like tired lanterns after a long road. Alden reached to the small table beside the door and set down the braille card, smoothing it with 2 careful fingers. "Come in," he said. "I can make coffee. It won't be good, but it'll be hot." Garron looked at his muddy boots, then at the clean braided rug just inside the door. "We'd ruin your floor." Alden gave a small, tired smile. "The floor has survived worse than rain." Still, Garron did not step in. Respect sometimes meant staying outside. Alden moved 3 steps into the room and uncovered the upright piano against the far wall, an old walnut instrument with pale scratches near the music stand and a tuning lever resting in a worn canvas roll on top. He touched the front panel, found middle C by memory, and pressed 1 key. The note rang out thin but steady, a little tired from the damp, yet clear enough to fill the room and reach the porch. Garron tilted his head, listening the way he might listen to an engine after a repair, waiting for the miss, the wobble, the truth under the sound. "Flat?" he asked. Alden's smile deepened. "A little. So am I tonight." The biker's scar shifted when he almost smiled back. Alden turned toward the doorway, blind eyes calm now, rainwater still dripping from his coat, sleeve onto the floor. "Tomorrow," Garron said, "I'll bring a better sleeve for that cane. Aluminum tube, 2 hose clamps, fresh reflective tape. Not pretty, but strong. You repair canes now." "I repair what gets people home. No sermon, just a fact." Alden stood with 1 hand on the piano and 1 hand on the cane, feeling both things hold him upright in different ways. He had not been carried home. He had not been dragged through the storm like a burden. A frightening man in soaked leather had given him sound, space, and time, and those 3 things had let him find his own door again. Outside, 1 Harley started, then another, each engine rolling low through the rain without hurry. Garron stepped back from the porch, lifted 2 fingers in a quiet farewell, and walked down the steps with water shining on his shoulders. Alden stayed in the doorway until the last headlight turned at the end of Hawthorne Row and the sound faded into the wet city. Then he wiped the braille card dry with the edge of his sleeve, leaned the ugly taped cane beside the piano, and pressed middle C once more, letting the single note hang in the warm room long after the bikes were gone. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.